The Money Show.
Investment School.
I once did a personal project in which I looked at the makeup of the JSE, and on the day that Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990, so it was February 1990, more than 90% of the value of the JSE was made up in gold shares. It was an astonishing revelation to me at that time. And over time, of course, the importance of gold shares has evaporated from the JSE as we've seen our resource of gold diminish considerably. And now it's a far more diversified industrial-based index and companies based all over the world. But it's not up to me to explain it. I'm going to let David Shapiro, the Stockbroker and Deputy Chairman at Sasfin Securities, explain it to us, because how the JSE is made up of different segments, different factors influence it, David. It's actually a fascinating ecosystem of investment opportunities. How do you like to look at the JSE?
Bruce, people often ask the question and they get quite frustrated about it. They say, why is the market so strong when everything here is so bad? We've got crime, corruption, load shedding, you name it, potholes. And even yesterday, attempts to close down the economy. And yet the market just keeps plugging away and going higher and higher and doing pretty well. And that's because of the diverse number of companies that we have. And it's a very diverse and well spread stock market. In fact, it is an international market. It's no longer the JSE. It doesn't represent SA Inc. It really represents what's happening in the rest of the world. So as you mentioned, in those 30 years since we opened up this country, things have changed quite dramatically. And we got some pretty huge companies that actually are listed on the JSE.
When you're saying it doesn't represent SA Inc. anymore, I don't think that's a criticism. I think it's actually there's a twinge of admiration in your voice, because we could never have imagined before 1994 that there would be companies of the scale of British American Tobacco and Richemont and the likes of Naspers and Prosus listed on the JSE. These are global multinationals that are significant in any market in any part of the world.
Absolutely right. And you can, by remaining in the JSE, you can get a very good exposure to the JSE. I have to qualify that, okay? And it's quite important to qualify that, because people also get a distorted view of global markets. And I sometimes, put my finger up people's noses by quoting, how well the S&P 500 has performed relative to the JSE, and that's true. And this is, I'm going to shock you with this, but it's, if you put $100 into the S&P 500 10 years ago, it's worth $257 or $257. That's pretty good growth. Now, if you put $100 into the JSE 10 years ago, even with our diverse companies, it's only worth $92.50. In other words, you've lost money. But
explain this to me, David, before you continue.
Yeah.
How, if the JSE is predominantly a global market with global companies and global exposures, where a good chunk of the companies that operate that trade on the JSE haven't a single operation other than perhaps a retail outlet or a mine or something in the country, how is the underperformance so dramatic?
Because in the first part of the century, in the first decade, we had huge outperforming mining shares. Over the last 10 years, these mining shares that we've been talking about, BHP's, Anglo-American, Glencore, South 32, they weren't all around there. Our gold mines, our platinum mines, didn't quite keep up with where the rest of the world was going, or where the US was going, which was mainly tech shares. Now, just let me give you some comfort. If you would have invested that same $100, not in the JSE, but in the UK market, it would have been worth $95. So you would have made $3 more in the UK market, in the FTSE 100, than you would have made in the JSE. Why? Because the composition of both our market and the FTSE, which is the UK market, are pretty much the same, made up of financials and made up of mining and energy stocks. So it wasn't only the JSE that has underperformed over the last decade, but also, also the FTSE, also the UK market. And you would have done only slightly better if you would have gone into Europe, the Euro Stoxx 500. So don't get up, people mustn't get upset. This is just, the US had an incredible decade where we had the likes of Apples and Amazons and Alphabets and Microsofts and all those kind of companies just running away. It was a decade of social media and a decade of technology advancement, and that drove the S&P way ahead of any other global markets.
Because the mistake many people can make now is say, okay, so the S&P 500 over the last 10 years delivered a massive return from $100 to $257. Everything else was a dog show. Therefore, all my money should go into the S&P 500 because Warren Buffett says never bet against America. Warren Buffett, when he dies, wants his fortune left to his wife to go mostly into the S&P 500. So obviously, that is the best place in the world to keep putting money into in dollar terms. And I'm not sure that necessarily will stand the test of time as an idea.
That's exactly the point. We can't look backwards. We've now got to try and forecast what's going to happen in the next decade. And we know what's going to drive the market. We hear about it all the time. Suddenly the news over the weekend is chatbots or artificial intelligence, GPT-4, or alternatively, it's electric vehicles. And there's a number of new drivers that are going to shape the global economy. And the answer is to know and try and work out which of those companies come. Now, this is where I think Africa has got a chance, because and that's why you mustn't be too negative on Africa. And I'm saying South Africa could be included in that. Why? Because where's the money going to go? It's going to go in seeking, whether it's cobalt, nickel, lithium, maybe platinum. I'm sure platinum. All of those metals could be part of what makes up what's needed to drive the next 10 years in the global economy. So I think we're looking at that, and what you've got to do now is say, okay, what's going to be which are the top 10 companies going to, in the US, which are they going to be now? Because Apple, I'm sure, will fall away. Amazon will fall away, as we've seen, over the last decade with a lot of energy companies. So that's why you can't, these are stats that we're quoting, that I'm quoting to you. We can't invest that way. We've got to look forward and say, okay, what's going to happen the next decade? Which are the companies that we have to now seek? So, but just, and I think we've got some pretty good businesses here that can stand that test of time.
Okay, so how then do we position ourselves, David? Because it's all well and good to talk in theory and say, right, over the last 10 years, this is what's happened. We need to think differently about the next 10 years. Well, then shape the next 10 years for me.
Okay, I'll give you my views. I think they're going to be the most exciting decade that we've had, far better than the social media decade, because the social media decade never brought anything. It brought old ladies looking at seeing what their granddaughters are doing on Facebook. It brought Instagram, it brought TikTok, it brought all of these social media apps, but they didn't do anything to productivity. Nothing.
No, they did a huge amount of productivity. They destroyed productivity through
They destroyed it. They did. What's a Generation Z or whatever it is, in fact, that's why the Chinese, that's the next thing that's going to be banned, spending too much time looking at TikTok, because it's almost habit forming. But Bruce, I think we're going to go into a very exciting period. I mean, I'm thrilled about this chat box, what it can do for productivity, what it can do for our businesses. Yes, at the moment we're using it as a toy. We're asking it to make up poems about ourselves and so on. But I mean, if you think about how this is going to help you, how it helps you almost translate, from one language to another. how it's going to help you in developing your business, I think that's going to be one of the a big driver. But it's more than that. We're seeing now, and I mean, we're seeing now a lot of, the transformation onto the cloud, but other transformations are taking place as well, besides moving our businesses and, onto the cloud. And why is it so important? Why do we talk like that? Because that means that you can run your business from anywhere in the world. You don't have to be stuck in your office with your server under the desk. And I think we're only in the early stages of making our businesses portable. The other one, so that's a big thing. The other one is, of course, is alternative energy. I mean, it makes headlines every day, and we know in this country, and this is another big driver in South Africa, is that the amount of money that's going to be spent, whether at the low level putting solar panels onto your roof, or alternatively doing it at a much more industrial strength type alternative energy. And what does that require? It requires engineering, it requires money, it requires investment. So I think that, that's going to be globally a big driver. It's a massive driver, no matter where you put your stand, whether you want to talk about coal, whatever it is, that's a swear word. And no matter how you feel about it, just don't bring it up, because I promise you're going to get all snotty 25-year-olds having a full go at you if you ever mention the word, coal or coal mining. So the world is going to transform. With that, electric vehicles. Nobody now, I mean, apart from South Africa, but I mean, outside this world, if you go to the big cities, whether it's New York, whether it's London, wherever it is in Europe, people want electric cars. That means we're transforming the whole way that way that we moved around. And just think, with electric cars got completely different mechanics. Is mechanics the right word? We haven't got inner workings. You don't need a mechanical engineer. It's not. It's a computer engineer.
Yeah.
And so. And again, what drives it? It's not petrol, it's not oil, it's batteries. So you now get a whole new industry going there, and everybody's running around the world now trying to find lithium deposits. So, Bruce, those are the exciting areas that we're going. Just some of them. I still think factories are going to transform into robotics. Use robotics and artificial intelligence to drive their factory. So I think there's so much going to happen in the next decade that we haven't even built on. At the moment, we're worried about Jay Powell, and is it going to be 25 points? Is it going to be 50 points?
Now that's such a critical part of this discussion, because that's in the immediate future. That's 5 percentage points either way in the next year or two. When we talk about investing, though, we've got to be taking a considerably longer term view. We've got to be deciding what the big trends are. We've got to be deciding what currencies we're investing in. We've got to be deciding what geographical regions we're investing in, and within those regions, we've got to be deciding on the themes, and then the specific companies that are going to deliver those themes to us in the best way. That would be brilliant investing. I'm not sure that 99% of us are equipped to do that, though.
You are. And if you don't know, then ask your grandson or nephew or somebody like that, because they'll tell you exactly what the good companies are and where trends are going. We actually know a lot more than we care to admit. We feign ignorance, but we do know. We see it in the newspapers all the time. We see it. We listen to radio. We listen to you. We watch it on TV, wherever it is. It's around us all the time. We just don't want to recognize it. And we like, when it comes to investment, we like to sit back and go passive. Just like, oh, well, I'll just wait for my financial planner to come and recommend some kind of tracker fund. That's the boring part of investing. The exciting part is doing exactly what we're talking about now. Going to find those businesses that will be the leaders in a decade's time, that will dominate the top of the leaderboard. And one of them has emerged. If you look at a company like NVIDIA, which is a semiconductor company, it didn't exist. When I say it didn't exist, it was It's grown to be a top 10 company now. I think it's almost as big as Berkshire Hathaway. Why? Because it makes, and I can't explain this technically, but it makes the kind of semiconductors that you need for artificial intelligence, that you need for graphics. It's way ahead of perhaps any of its competitors, and its market cap has just grown astronomically in the last few years because of the skills. My favorite company, and one that I keep chirping about all the time, is the Dutch company, or the Holland company called ASML, that makes the machines, that makes the semiconductors. I mean, these are extremely high-tech companies, and these are the ones, Bruce, that it's fun to seek out and to read about and to follow up on and do the investigation.
Was it JP Morgan who said, don't invest in the mines, invest in the companies that make the picks and the shovels? I think it was him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that, in fact, I don't know if it was JP Morgan, but it certainly applied in South Africa. If you think about the people who made the money, were those people who sold the picks and shovels,
Yes.
not those who bought the mining rights. The tents and all the instruments that went, they're the ones who did incredibly well, in the mining industry, and it applied to South Africa as well. Don't you remember Levi Strauss? When I think it was one of the gold rushes in the US, where they made pants. Pants were wearing out, and he used tent material to make to make trousers, to make a
jean
whatever
pant.
they wore. Make a jeans pants, yeah.
To make a jean pant. And that's it is so exciting about the world of investing. And sometimes you have to suspend you have to really dig deep into your inner child and really look at the magic of what individuals and companies are creating. I look at how Elon Musk is revolutionizing the world, for example, and whether you find him an arrogant, objectionable sod, or whether you find him something of a prodigy and a genius and somebody who is fundamentally shifting our belief systems and the way in which the world works. I prefer the latter. You've got to look at people like him and say these are the Edisons of our time. These are the people who actually are changing the future today.
No doubt about it, and that's who we're looking for. People ignore the history of South Africa, and it's so colorful, particularly the way that the mines developed here, because these were all venture capital. They were VC. What did you do? You got mining rights. Sure, you sunk a few boreholes, and from that you developed a mine. But you had to go sell that concept to somebody. If somebody had to provide the finance, because it was going to take a long time from the time that you put down those boreholes to the time that you actually extracted the ore and turned it into a piece of gold. But South Africa was built on those kind of people, people who came here, those entrepreneurs,
but here's the important. Here's the $257 question. That level of creativity and creation. Yes, there's plenty of opportunity to invest in the extraction process of the minerals from Africa that are going to fuel this new economy, as you've so eloquently and beautifully painted it this evening. But are the companies into which we invest going to be companies that are located on the African continent, or are they going to be companies that come from elsewhere to exploit the opportunity that the continent presents?
That doesn't matter. You know what I mean? That's what we got to seek out. My whole business, my whole investment philosophy now is I don't, from me, it's not geographic, and it doesn't matter which market it's. I try and say which are the best 20, 25 companies I want to own. And wherever they are, if we have them in South Africa, that's all very well. If not, well, you go into that market. But from a JSP point of view as well, we're hoping, I think my big hope is that we can actually develop some of those businesses here. And, they can emerge as some really good operations. If we look here, I mean, if I go through the list here, don't ignore luxury. I mean, that's a theme we haven't discussed. That's for another day. But I mean, Richemont is a superb global company. Even if you look at Process and Naspers, underneath it is Tencent. Tencent is going through a little bit of a rough time at the moment. We're waiting for their results to come. But just look at the value that you have added and earned from being in, both process and Naspers. And so we go. Our miners are still pretty. BHP is a top miners. Admittedly, it doesn't do much business in South Africa, but you can go through and extract a pretty good list of companies that are here in South Africa. We're just hoping that we could open the way for more of those businesses to, for local business to emerge. You see what's come out of a company like Bidcorp, superb international business. Which is, and so on, MTN, so on, so you can put together a pretty good list of decent businesses here.
David Shapiro, at that point, we will leave it. Thank you. Stockbroker, Deputy Chairman at Sasfin Securities. David Shapiro, Headmaster of our fabulous investment school this evening here on The Money Show. Thank you, David.